today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. In publicly weighing her options, moving up in weight, former unified super featherweight champion Mikaela Mayer has garnered the attention of two of Matchroom's Valkyries, two of Matchroom's champions, Terry Harper
at 154,
Sandy Ryan
at 147.
Mikaela Mayer took to her social media and stated, "Time to let my body do what it wants. I'm a big girl, coming for the big girls," to which Terry Harper responded, "Catch weight," to which Sandy Ryan responded, "Big girls, big fights."
Now, one of these fights is a lot more realistic than the other, and that fight is the Terry Harper fight. Lest we forget, before it ever became about Mikaela and Alicia, it was about Mikaela and Terry.
I wouldn't mind seeing Mikaela move up to 147, fight Sandy, but Sandy's supposed to be fighting Jessica McCaskill towards the end of this summer, and that might be the fight that she caps off the year with, depending on how it goes, so on and so forth.
Sandy's spoken for.
Sandy Ryan is spoken for. For the foreseeable future, Sandy has a prior engagement, whereas Terry, to my knowledge, Terry's free. She ain't got no dance partner.
Mikaela responded to Sandy by saying, 100, you never left my hit list.
In my previous video, we talked about how Mikaela Mayer is plotting a course north of lightweight, north of 135 pounds, and how that puts distance between her and Alicia Baumgartner. There was some desire to see a second fight given the closeness of the first one, but that doesn't look to be happening in the near future, and Mikaela's not going to wait around. She wants to move up. She wants to fight in big fights.
And she's likely enjoying not having to boil down to 130. Likely doesn't really want to boil down to 135, not unless it's for a big fight.
There doesn't look to be a big fight on the horizon, making that weight needlessly just to fight in what are non-title fights, just to hold a position to perhaps fight for a title. She might as well move up and wait and see if she can't take on a champion straight away. And as stated, Sandy Ryan is spoken for. I don't mind the idea of Mayer versus Ryan, but that's not about to happen.
This might.
Mayer versus Harper was the original super featherweight rivalry, the hotly contested bout between champions before Terry was beaten by Alicia, and then it became about her.
It's a common opponent between them.
Alicia Baumgartner gave both Mikaela and Terry their lone defeats, their lone professional losses. Here and now, I wouldn't mind seeing them fight each other. It can happen, at least in theory.
It's possible.
There's a caveat.
There is.
That would require Mikaela Mayer to cross over to the Matchroom and DAZN side of things. She would have to box off-platform. Thus, Eddie Hearn would have to make it worth her while. I mean, Mikaela's open to the fight, but she's not going to fight on the cheap. She's exploring a fight with a junior middleweight champion, though she's not the only one.
Terry isn't.
There is also newly crowned two-division champion Natasha Jonas, who could afford Mikaela the opportunity to box for either a junior middleweight title or a welterweight title.
To my knowledge, she hasn't vacated them all. She hasn't vacated them yet. The title she won at 154.
Natasha just won the IBF at 147. And that's a decent fight for Mikaela. That's a good fight right then and there. That would not require Mikaela to box on another platform under another banner. Between Top Rank and Boxer, Sky Sports and ESPN, they can make that fight happen.
Sky Sports is Top Rank's UK broadcast affiliate, their broadcast partner in that region of the world. Mikaela has boxed under the Boxer banner before, the Baumgartner fight.
She could do it again for Natasha, provided that Natasha is receptive to the fight, that Tasha's willing to do it. And that's the question mark. Is that a fight that Natasha wants? If it's a fight that she doesn't want and they can't do it, then Mikaela can go back to exploring a Harper fight.
Mayer's got options.
Because she's not limiting herself to campaigning at either 130 or 135, because she's open to moving up and down in weight for big fights, super fights. She actually has a lot of options now, but
she's got to keep an open mind, and so does Top Rank. They have to be willing to loan her out.
And I think they are, because Top Rank in-house. They don't have anything for Mikaela to do. They don't have anyone for her to fight under the Top Rank banner. So they have to be flexible. To get her the fights that she wants, they have to be willing to loan her out.
Send her to Matchroom.
Matchroom sent the people at Top Rank and Boxer, Alicia Baumgartner, for the super fight between her and Mikaela. They should be willing to return the favor, and given that they don't have much for Mikaela to do, I think they would.
And I think Matchroom would be receptive towards making this fight. They wanted to make the fight, the rematch between Natasha and Terry.
They didn't have any luck with that, and they're still not having any luck. But what about Terry and Mikaela?
It can happen.
It should. Last year was a very big year for the sport of women's boxing. They have to keep that momentum going. going with meaningful fights and significant fights. This could be one among them. I like Michaela Mayer's thought process here. I like the way her mind works.
Let's see what develops.
Because I could go for Mayer versus Harper later on this year. Men's heavyweight news. Jared Anderson weighed in on his performance in the Charles Martin fight, saying, "I would have stopped him if I could have, but he couldn't," and that's what we all saw in that fight. In truth, nobody ever dominated Charles Martin the same way that Anthony Joshua dominated Charles Martin. Back when Charles Martin was an unbeaten fighter and a champion, nobody has duplicated the
domination, 2-round destruction.
Charles Martin has lost a few fights since he fought Anthony Joshua. He lost to Kobnoski, he lost to Luis Ortiz, more recently to Jared Anderson, but nobody did to Charles Martin what Anthony Joshua did to Charles Martin. I don't think he gets enough credit for that.
In light of this,
I definitely didn't expect him to go anywhere, said Anderson to a group of reporters. A win is a win, but scoring eye-catching knockouts is what Anderson has built his reputation upon in a short amount of time. Now, knowing what it's like to push his body past its breaking point and having to dig deep was a plus, according to Anderson. Usually, whenever he connects with a monster right or left hand, his opponents simply crumble to the turf and remain there.
Charles Martin didn't. Charles took his best.
He held his own, and he managed to land some very strong backhands in the process, snapping Jared Anderson's head back. I remember after the fight, Anderson said that he was never hurt by Charles Martin, but it certainly looked that way from the outside looking in.
He looked hurt to me.
Everything in that fight was a learning experience for Anderson, but that doesn't mean he fully enjoyed the lesson. Experience is what he desperately needed, but if Martin's chin wasn't seemingly made out of thick steel, Anderson reveals that he would have gladly accepted a quick night at the office. "I would have stopped him if I could have. I didn't get the stoppage, and I'm more than okay with that."
I mean, that's fine.
It's not the end of the world that he didn't stop Charles Martin, and there was a valuable lesson there for Jared Anderson to seek the victory when the knockout doesn't show up, when the knockout doesn't happen. That's all well and good, but let's not pretend that Charles Martin's chin is made out of cast iron, that it's made out of steel or granite.
No.
It's not.
It's been stopped before.
Anthony Joshua stopped him. Luis Ortiz stopped him. Jared couldn't.
What does that mean?
Perhaps what it means is that young Jared is not as big a puncher as those heavyweights are, in that there's more work needs doing.
He's going to get to it very soon in late August. Jared Anderson to make a quick turnaround against Andre Rudenko on ESPN August 26th in Tulsa.
Andre Rudenko, a moderately sized Ukrainian heavyweight, smaller than Charles Martin.
He's only about 6 feet tall. That's actually really small for today's heavyweight division.
Jared Anderson will return to the ring just 8 weeks after winning the toughest fight of his career. BoxingScene.com has learned that the undefeated heavyweight contender will face Ukrainian veteran Andre Rudenko August 26th in Tulsa, Oklahoma. ESPN will televise Anderson versus Rudenko as a 10-round main event that night from the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in Tulsa. The 6'4", 243-pound Anderson went the distance for the first time in his career July 1st. The former IBF champion Charles Martin took the young knockout artist 10 rounds in that bout, which ESPN aired from the Huntington Center in Anderson's hometown of Toledo, Ohio.
Rudenko ain't built like Charles Martin. He's not as tall, not as long, not as physically imposing.
It's actually a far cry from what Jared Anderson faced in Charles Martin, and being honest, he's a far cry from the upper echelon heavyweights, the big men among the big men, those guys that stand in at about 6'5", 6'6", 6'7".
So why the quick turnaround?
They likely want to keep Jared Anderson sharp. I mean, at minimum, that's what a busy schedule does, and I have no issues with that. But Andre Rudenko does not represent today's heavyweight division. I mean, what Jared Anderson would have to face to see himself become a world champion. Andre Rudenko is not preparation for that or a representation of that. Those 6'5" and 6'7" fighters.
This guy's only 6 feet tall. There's cruiserweights bigger than this guy.
Not saying he's a small fry, but for today's heavyweight division, he is on the smaller end of the spectrum. He is even smaller than Jared Anderson, who's not a big heavyweight.
Jared's about, 6'3", 6'4"?
He's not a lumbering lummox. He doesn't take up as much space as, say, a Daniel Dubois or a Joe Joyce, an Anthony Joshua, a Tyson Fury, or a Deontay Wilder. Jared Anderson is very lean and athletic as far as today's heavyweights go. More nimble, light on his feet, though not as big on power, not as big as them.
He's got the range of motion and speed, slickness that perhaps some other heavyweights don't have, but there's a trade-off. He's not as big a puncher as those guys are.
Now, he's going to be facing the 39-year-old Rudenko later on next month, who's taken Zile Zhang and Povetkin, Agit Kabayel and Huey Fury, Lucas Brown, the distance.
Went the distance with all of those guys.
There is a feeling that he might take Jared Anderson the distance, as he seems to be a very stubborn customer, crafty, knows how to survive.
Charles Martin was able to expose a defensive deficiency in Jared Anderson's movement, that sometimes Jared pulls back in straight lines. And while he may be able to get away with that with more moderately sized heavyweights that don't have that much reach or height,
right,
he can't do that with those guys that are 6'5".
Guys with big height, big reach, he pulls back in a straight line. They can still touch him with straight punches as he tries to make his exit.
Charles Martin did several times.
He's got to clean that up. He can't keep doing that. Now, Andre Rudenko, being only 6 feet tall in today's heavyweight division, a shorter man than Jared Anderson, he may not be able to exploit that defensive deficiency because he ain't got reach like Charles or height like Charles.
May not be able to land like Charles.
So this is seemingly a less risky fight for Jared Anderson than the Charles Martin fight proved to be.
So if the goal is for Jared Anderson to one day become a world champion at heavyweight, they've got to keep putting him in there with the big men. I mean, the big men among the big men, the big guys.
It's good that they're getting him back out there so quickly, that quick turnaround. I look forward to seeing him in action again. He's a very entertaining young fighter to watch, though if he is to one day be ready to challenge for a full title of any kind, he's got to fight more Charles Martins.
Guys like him, guys that size.
Because that's what's waiting for him in the upper echelon of the heavyweight division. Guys the same size as Charles and better boxers.
Better than Charles.
It's the inconvenient truth. Finally, ahead of the big welterweight showdown between Terence Crawford and Errol Spence, Errol Spence's trainer, Derek James, says he's not concerned with Terence's power. Who the fuck has Crawford fought?
He's fought two of the same guys as Errol Spence Jr. Has Derek been living under a rock?
I've always thought the critiques and criticisms levied against Terence's resume are short-sighted, lazy, and disingenuous even. Disingenuous.
Yeah.
Who the fuck has he fought, man? What you talking about, man? Who's he fought? James told BoxingScene.com in an interview. Who were those guys that he knocked out? Everybody can punch. It's easier to beat guys that are lesser. That doesn't mean anything. He's fighting guys who can't, you know what I mean?
I've had no shortage of fun reminding Spence's fans that Terence Crawford knocked out Sean Porter and Errol didn't.
I've had a lot of fun reminding Errol Spence Jr.'s fans that even though Errol landed more punches on Sean Porter than Terence Crawford did, Terence actually stopped him. And in truth, I called that outcome 2 years before the fight took place because I knew.
Errol's power isn't what they say it is.
It's not that he's pillow-fisted. It's not that he doesn't have power. It's that the damage he causes is damage by way of accumulation. He's got to accumulate punches on his opponents in order to stop them. And opposite the ring, Sean Porter, one of the best chins in the entire welterweight division.
He's got it.
Listen,
Look.
Errol Spence Jr. landed a lot of punches on Mikey Garcia, and I mean a lot of punches. And he couldn't drop him, and he couldn't stop him. A fat lightweight was able to go the distance with Errol Spence Jr., a fat lightweight who jumped up 2 divisions for that fight. He saw the 12th round, so on that premise, I figured, if this guy can't stop a chubby lightweight, he's not stopping Sean.
Fat.
That was my rationale, whereas with Terence is more of a counterpuncher than an Errol Spence Jr., more of a sharpshooter. That if Errol Spence Jr. is a Gatling gun, Terence is a sniper rifle, more likely to land a shot the opponent doesn't expect.
Punch they don't see, and those are the ones that take you out.
Even a guy with a granite chin like Sean Porter, when hit with a punch he doesn't expect and he doesn't brace himself for, he goes down. He went down 2 times in the Terence Crawford fight before his father, Kenny Porter, threw in the towel.
I literally said that he would.
I've always thought that the critiques and criticisms levied against Terence Crawford and his resume are short-sighted, disingenuous, and lazy, because what's so special about Errol's resume? What's so great? What's on there that isn't on Terence's resume? They both fought Sean Porter. They both fought Kell Brook.
Criticizing Terence's resume relies on the principle that somehow Errol's is better.
Think about it. They both fought Kell Brook. They both fought Sean Porter. Now, Errol did fight Yordenis Ugas, and Terrence didn't.
The same Ugas that got beat by Sean Porter?
Same Sean Porter that Terrence Crawford ended up stopping, that Sean Porter?
Sean beat Ugas and Terrence beat Sean.
You're telling me that Errol Spence Jr.'s resume is head and shoulders above Terrence Crawford's because he beat Yordenis Ugas?
Give me a break.
Because he beat Danny Garcia? Because Terrence Crawford wouldn't have beat Danny Garcia? The Danny Garcia that many years ago paid Victor Postol to step aside, down there at 140 pounds.
When Victor was his mandatory.
My honest opinion is Victor Postol might have beat Danny Garcia. Had the fight actually taken place, Victor might have beat him and took his belt.
It's not outside the realm of possibility.
Yeah, I think Victor would have beat him. It's not outside the realm of possibility that Victor would have given Danny his first professional loss because unofficially in Puerto Rico, Mauricio Herrera gave Danny his first professional loss, and we all saw it. We all know Danny got a gift in that fight.
Infamously.
Guy's getting gift decisions against journeymen like Mauricio Herrera, and you expect me to believe he would have beat unbeaten Victor Postol? I don't think so. I'll tell you what.
What?
I think Victor would have beat him, and I think Terrence would have stopped him.
That's what I think.
The disingenuous criticisms levied against Terrence Crawford's resume rely on the principle that we're going to ignore certain things. We're going to ignore that Terrence actually made Danny an offer, and Danny turned it down. Turned it down to fight two journeymen in what were two tune-up fights.
So that Derek James could turn around and ask who the fuck is Terrence Crawford fought. Hey, he tried to fight the same guys you fought, but they didn't want to do it.
Not with Terrence, and from where I'm sitting, that says a lot. That tells me Danny was willing to roll the dice with your fighter, but with Terrence, he didn't want to know.
If they would have fought, I think Terrence would have stopped him.
And if I'm being honest, there is nothing, absolutely nothing spectacular about Errol Spence Jr.'s resume.
Every single one of those guys that he fought, I think Terrence would have stopped those guys.
Criticizing Terrence's resume relies on the principle that somehow Errol's is better, that his resume is head and shoulders above Terrence's for fighting the same guys that froze out Terrence.
And then asking who is Terrence fought.
It's all very disingenuous. The silver lining is, later on this month, towards the end of it, we get to find out what's what. The chickens, as they were. The chickens will come home to roost.